There's a particular kind of childhood that doesn't look like childhood at all. The 8-year-old who comforts their crying parent instead of being comforted. The 10-year-old who makes dinner because someone has to. The 12-year-old who mediates their parents' fights with the skill of a trained therapist. These children didn't grow up. They never get the chance to be children in the first place. They step directly from infancy into a strange twilight between childhood and adulthood, carrying responsibilities that would crush many adults. The psychology of a child who grew up too fast is unlike anything else in human development. It's a paradox of competence and loss, strength and fragility, wisdom and innocence stolen. These children develop capabilities that amaze adults while missing crucial developmental stages that leave them with gaps they'll spend their entire lives trying to fill. When childhood is replaced by premature responsibility, something fundamental breaks in the natural order of human development. The child becomes what psychologists call parentified, forced to be the parent to their own parents, the adult in a house full of children who happen to be grown. They learn to read the emotional temperature of a room before they learn to read books. They master the art of managing adult emotions before they understand their own. I knew a woman who could describe, with perfect clarity, the night her childhood ended. She was 7 years old, and her mother was on the bathroom floor, drunk and sobbing. Instead of being afraid, instead of crying for help, she felt a strange calm descend upon her. She got a wet washcloth, helped her mother to bed, and cleaned up the mess. From that moment forward, she was no longer a child. She was the keeper of secrets, the maintainer of facades, the small guardian of a broken adult. These children develop what researchers call pseudo-maturity, a convincing performance of adulthood that masks a terrified child underneath. They're praised for being so mature, so responsible, so capable. Adults marvel at their independence, their emotional intelligence, their ability to handle difficult situations. But this praise feels like being congratulated for drowning gracefully. They're not mature, they're surviving. They're not independent, they're abandoned. They're not emotionally intelligent, they're hypervigilant. The cost of this premature growth is profound and often invisible until much later. These children miss what psychologists call critical periods, windows of development that, once closed, can never be fully reopened. The time when they should have been learning to play, they were learning to survive. When they should have been developing trust, they were learning that adults couldn't be trusted. When they should have been exploring who they were being whoever they needed to be to keep things stable. Think about what play means to a child's development. It's not just fun, it's how children learn to experiment with reality, to try on different roles, to fail safely, to imagine different worlds. But the child who grew up too fast doesn't play, they perform. Their imagination isn't used for creating magical worlds, but for anticipating danger, managing chaos, maintaining the delicate balance that keeps their world from collapsing. A man once told me that he realized at age 30 that he had never actually played. As a child, even his games were strategic. Playing house meant practicing for when he'd have to take care of his younger siblings. Playing with toys meant keeping his brother quiet, so their father wouldn't get angry. Every moment of his childhood was purposeful, directed toward survival and stability. The concept of doing something just for joy, just for fun, was as foreign to him as speaking another language. These children become emotional chameleons, shape-shifting to meet whatever need presents itself. With an angry parent, they become peacekeepers. With a depressed parent, they become cheerleaders. With an absent parent, they become self-sufficient islands. They develop what one researcher called emotional echolocation, the ability to sense emotional dangers in the dark and navigate around them. This creates a particular kind of intelligence that's both a gift and a curse. They can read a room instantly, picking up on micro-expressions, tonal shifts, and unspoken tensions that others miss entirely. In professional settings, this makes them seem almost psychic in their ability to navigate complex interpersonal dynamics. But this hyper-awareness is exhausting. They can never just be in a room. They're always scanning, always analyzing, always preparing for emotional contingencies. The relationships of those who grew up too fast carry distinct patterns. They often find themselves in relationships where they continue the caretaking role, drawn to partners who need fixing, saving, or managing. They're comfortable with dysfunction because functionality feels foreign. Healthy relationships can actually feel threatening because they don't know what to do when they're not needed, when there's no crisis to manage, no emotional fire to put out. A therapist once described treating adults who grew up too fast as teaching someone to be young for the first time. They have to learn basics that most people absorbed naturally: how to play without purpose, how to rest without guilt, how to need without shame, how to receive without immediately reciprocating. It's like teaching someone to walk when they've been running their whole life. The anger comes later, usually in their 20s or 30s, when they realize what was taken from them. Not just childhood, but the right to be imperfect, to be messy, to be selfish in the healthy way children need to be selfish to develop a strong sense of self. They're angry at the parents who failed them, but also at themselves for being angry, because they understand too well why their parents failed. They see their parents' wounds too clearly to hate them, but too clearly to forgive them either. This is the cruel bind of growing up too fast. You understand too much. You see your parents not as the gods children need them to be, but as the flawed, wounded humans they are. This premature disillusionment creates what psychologists call developmental trauma, not from what happened, but from what didn't happen. The absence of safety, the absence of true dependency, the absence of that blessed ignorance that allows children to just be children. Work becomes a complicated arena for those who grew up too fast. They're often overachievers, driven by an unconscious belief that their value lies only in what they can provide. They take on too much, struggle to delegate, and feel personally responsible for everyone's well-being. They're the office therapist, the one who remembers everyone's birthday, the one who stays late to help others with their work. But this competence masks a deep exhaustion, a bone-deep tiredness from a vigilance that started before they could spell the word. The body keeps the score in particular ways for these individuals. The constant stress of premature responsibility often manifests as chronic health issues, autoimmune disorders, digestive problems, chronic pain. Their bodies never learned to relax because relaxation was dangerous. Their nervous systems are permanently set to high alert, scanning for threats that may no longer exist, but feel eternally present.
Healing for those who grew up too fast is a delicate process. It requires grieving the childhood they never had while building the internal parent they never experienced. They have to learn to comfort the child within who's been comforting everyone else. They have to develop what therapists call earned security, creating for themselves the safety they were never given. This often means a period of what looks like regression, but is actually integration. They might suddenly become interested in things they should have outgrown: children's movies, stuffed animals, simple games.
They're not being childish. They're being the child they never got to be. They're filling in the gaps, however imperfectly, however belatedly. Relationships with their own children, if they have them, become particularly poignant. They're often determined to give their children the childhood they never had, but this can swing to extremes. Either they become overprotective, trying to shield their children from any difficulty, or they struggle with normal childhood behaviors because they never learned what normal childhood looks like. The sound of their own child playing freely can bring both joy and grief. Joy for their child, grief for themselves. The gift hidden in this wound is real but hard-won. Those who grew up too fast often develop extraordinary empathy, resilience, and wisdom. They become the healers, the helpers, the ones who can sit with others' pain because they've been sitting with their own since before they could tie their shoes. They see through facades because they've been maintaining them since childhood. They can help others find safety because they know intimately what its absence feels like. But perhaps the greatest achievement for someone who grew up too fast is learning to be ordinary, to be mediocre at something without shame, to need help without apologizing, to disappoint others without crumbling. to put themselves first without guilt, to play without purpose, to rest without earning it, to exist without constantly proving their worth through their usefulness. The child who grew up too fast carries within them both a wise old soul and a frightened young child. Healing means introducing these two parts to each other, letting the wise adult comfort the scared child, letting the playful child teach the serious adult how to laugh without reason. It means recognizing that the competence that saved them as children might be limiting them as adults. As you reflect on this, whether it's your story or someone you know, remember that growing up too fast isn't a badge of honor or a mark of shame. It's simply what happened when a child did what they needed to do to survive. The strength it took to carry adult responsibilities as a child is the same strength that can now be used to reclaim the childhood that was lost, piece by piece, moment by moment, in the safety of an adulthood where they finally have the power to give themselves what they never received. The psychology of a child who grew up too fast is ultimately a story of adaptation, survival, and the long journey back to a self that was never allowed to fully form. It's about learning that they don't have to earn love through competence, that their worth isn't tied to their usefulness, and that sometimes the bravest thing they can do is allow themselves to be young, even if for the first time,